What if I told you that the very act of wanting someone, of desiring their attention, affection, or love, is often the reason they pull away? Picture this. You're not speaking, you're not trying, and yet they're drawn to you. Their eyes search yours. Their mind runs wild with curiosity. Why? Because in your silence, there is a mystery. In your stillness, a gravity. You are not performing, you are being. Fully, unapologetically, unshakably. But now flip it. You chase. You please. You try to impress. And suddenly, everything collapses. Interest fades. The dynamic shifts. And you're left wondering what went wrong. How can the same person be magnetic when silent and repellent when expressive? Why does emotional openness, something we're taught to value, often lead to rejection? Here's the unsettling paradox. People are drawn not to those who need them, but to those who don't. Desire can be beautiful, but exposed too soon, it becomes weakness. Vulnerability is human, but without strength behind it, it reads as desperation. And attraction, that invisible pull, obeys no moral law. It obeys power. And yet, we're told to be ourselves, to express freely, to be open-hearted. But in doing so, we unknowingly strip ourselves of the very mystique that creates tension, and tension is the soul of attraction. Why do we fall for those who are distant? Why does silence excite us more than constant validation? Could it be that the rules we've been given about love and connection are flawed, maybe even inverted? It's time to dismantle that illusion. Because if you don't, you'll spend your life chasing instead of drawing in, performing instead of radiating, begging instead of owning. And here's the truth. The most powerful people in any room, the ones who are desired, respected, even feared, aren't always the loudest or most impressive. They are the ones who are least affected. But how do you become unaffected when your entire nervous system screams for closeness? How do you control attraction when your mind is consumed by desire? The answer isn't in being colder. It's in becoming still, centered, rooted, unshakable. This is where dark psychology meets Stoic philosophy, two forces that, when combined, give you the keys not just to attraction, but to control. Not to manipulate, but to influence subtly, powerfully, and permanently. But before you can use them, you must first understand the invisible mechanism that's been running your emotional life without your consent. Let's begin there. Attraction isn't random. It's not a spark. It's not magic. It's a psychological pattern, deeply embedded in your unconscious, one shaped by childhood wounds, cultural conditioning, and an existential hunger to matter. Let's start with something Carl Jung once said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Now consider that in the realm of attraction, how many times have you found yourself magnetized by someone who didn't return the feeling? How often have you felt your worth collapsing when someone grew distant? And how many times have you believed this was just how love worked? It wasn't fate. It was programming. There is a hidden engine inside you, a psychological wound driving your need for validation, affection, and romantic significance. You weren't born with this. It was installed, piece by piece, moment by moment. And here's the truth most never dare to face. We are not drawn to what's good for us. We are drawn to what is familiar. That woman who feels intoxicatingly out of reach, she mirrors your earliest experience of emotional inconsistency. That man whose silence makes you obsess, he reactivates a part of your psyche that was trained to believe love must be earned, chased, or proven. This is where dark psychology enters the room. Because at its core, dark psychology is not about deceit. It's about the unspoken rules of human behavior. It's about recognizing that people don't respond to logic. They respond to emotion, trauma, and power. It's about knowing that attention is a drug, And the person who controls the supply controls the bond. This is why intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological principle used by casinos and social media platforms, can be more addictive than love itself. Give someone affection, then withdraw. Show interest, then pull back. The brain becomes hooked on the uncertainty, craving resolution. But there is none, and so the craving becomes obsession. But this isn't manipulation, it's reality. You don't have to use this knowledge to control others. You can use it to liberate yourself. Because when you understand what makes people chase, you also understand why you've spent years chasing. Let's go deeper. Nietzsche once warned that the greatest form of control is not force, it's seduction. Not by domination, but by shaping desire itself. And what is more seductive than someone who doesn't need your approval? Someone who could walk away at any moment and yet chooses to stay. This is the paradox of power. The less you need someone, the more they feel drawn to you. The more silent you are, the louder their mind becomes in your absence. And the more whole you are without them, the more they want to be part of your world. But here's where the philosophical layer sharpens the edge. Stoic philosophy, unlike modern self-help mantras, doesn't teach you how to win people. It teaches you how to become immune to their power over you. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And what is less controllable than another person's desire? The moment you build your identity on being wanted, you hand your power away. You become enslaved to attention, addicted to response, fractured by silence. But the Stoic reclaims this ground. He doesn't beg for affection. He doesn't collapse when ignored. He watches his own mind and masters it. Because true influence, true attraction begins when you no longer fear losing it. And this is where psychology and philosophy meet. Dark psychology teaches you what shapes behavior. Stoicism teaches you how to rise above it. Together, they reveal that most people are not loving, they are coping. They are using connection to patch a wound, escape a void, or distract from themselves. But the one who is whole, the one who is anchored in themselves, becomes rare, magnetic, powerful. Now think back to every failed connection you've had. Were you showing up as a grounded force or a leaking wound? Were you centered in presence or spiraling in self-doubt? This isn't about shame. It's about recognition. Because only when you see the machinery of your own attraction patterns can you disassemble it. Let's bring in Schopenhauer. He believed that desire is suffering, that the human being is cursed to crave what can never fully satisfy. He saw love not as romance, but as nature's trick to ensure reproduction. And when you observe your own longing from this cold vantage point, a strange thing happens. You become free. You stop romanticizing your need. You stop thinking you'll be complete once they love you. And instead, you begin the real work, not of seduction, but of becoming unshakable. Because what you're really chasing isn't a person. It's a feeling of being wanted, seen, chosen. But that feeling will never be stable if someone else is the source of it. And so, we return to the hidden problem. You're chasing from emptiness. And emptiness cannot attract fullness. You must first become full yourself. Only then do you stop chasing. Only then do they start pursuing. But that fullness doesn't come from pretending to be powerful. It comes from understanding what robbed you of it in the first place. And now, you're ready to see how that emptiness left unchecked shapes everything. Every message you send, every silence you break, every moment you try to prove your worth. It's time to see what that emptiness costs you. Because next, we enter the shadow realm. You think you're acting from clarity. You think you're reaching out because you feel a spark, or because she's different. You tell yourself it's genuine, real, natural. But underneath your words, beneath the smile, behind every glance and message, there's something else running the show. A silent panic, a subtle void, a craving you won't admit to. And this craving doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't demand, it suggests. It tells you, just say something. Don't let her lose interest. Just show her you care. So you do. You reach out. You respond quickly. You accommodate. You try to be the man she wants. But what you don't realize is this. Every act of unconscious pursuit signals one thing lack. And the subconscious mind of the other person hears it loud and clear. He needs me more than I need him. That sentence alone is enough to collapse attraction, because once need enters the frame, power exits. You've stepped into the arena of energetic imbalance, a dynamic where one person becomes the supplier and the other becomes the addict. And even if you're offering affection, attention, love, it comes wrapped in invisible anxiety. People feel it, even if they don't know how to name it. Let's bring in neuroscience. The human brain is hardwired for status detection, not in terms of wealth or fame, but in energy, in presence, in emotional gravity. The limbic system, especially the amygdala, constantly scans for cues. Who leads? Who follows? Who sets the rhythm in this interaction? Who adjusts themselves? And who remains still? Attraction isn't built in words, it's built in these subtle power exchanges. And the tragedy? You could be genuine, loving, loyal. But if your energy is needy, anxious, or overly available, your words become irrelevant. This is how unconscious desire undermines power without saying a word. Let's get more personal. How many times have you felt the urge to text someone, not because you had something to say, but because their silence was unbearable? How often have you imagined scenarios, she's probably talking to someone else, and then acted out of fear, trying to reassert your presence in her mind? That's not connection. That's control disguised as care. And it backfires. Every time. Because attention given from fear is unattractive. But here's the cruel irony. The more anxious you feel about someone, the more you act out of sync with who you truly are. You're no longer centered. You're performing. And that performance is exhausting for both you and them. Now layer on cultural conditioning. From films, songs, and stories, you've been trained to believe that chasing, proving, and romantic persistence are noble. You've seen characters win love by never giving up, by showing up, by being there. But in reality, those acts often breed emotional suffocation, not intimacy. Because people aren't drawn to intensity, they're drawn to mystery. And mystery cannot exist in the presence of constant availability. So what happens? You begin to collapse your own identity to maintain attraction. You suppress your truth. You tolerate things you shouldn't. You start walking on eggshells, fearing that one wrong word will drive them away. And in doing so, you abandon yourself. This is the deepest consequence of unconscious desire. Self-betrayal. You override your own boundaries. You shrink your needs. You become who you think they want, rather than who you are. And here's where it becomes existential. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote that hell is other people. But he wasn't condemning connection, he was revealing that we often exist as mirrors for one another's insecurity. That we shape our behavior based on how we imagine others perceive us. So when you're in the presence of someone you desire, you contort yourself into their fantasy version of you. You lose authenticity. You lose depth. You lose the inner calm that made you attractive in the first place. And worst of all, you start to resent them for not loving the version of you you performed into existence. But how could they? They never met the real you. They met the ghost you summoned to keep them close. This is why relationships that start with unconscious pursuit often rot from the inside out. Because they weren't built on power, clarity, and presence. They were built on compensation, anxiety, and illusion. So what's the cost? You lose your voice. You compromise your values. You become addicted to crumbs of attention. You abandon your mission, your discipline, your solitude, all in the hope that love will complete you. But it never does. Because no relationship can fix what you refuse to face in yourself. And until you confront the source of your craving, every interaction becomes a transaction. Every silence becomes a threat. Every unmet expectation becomes a wound. This is the unseen consequence. You become your own jailer, bound by fear, driven by desire, trapped in the illusion that love will save you. But it won't. Only you can do that. And to do that, you must rebel, not against them, against everything you were taught to believe about love and attraction. Because if you don't, you'll keep repeating the same pattern. Chase, collapse, resent, repeat. So the question becomes, are you ready to stop chasing? Are you ready to reclaim the power you've been giving away for years? Because now, the rebellion begins. It begins with a whisper inside you. A whisper that says, I'm done. Done performing, done proving, done contorting your soul to be worthy in someone else's eyes. This is where the rebellion starts, not with rage, not with violence, but with stillness, with the radical refusal to keep playing a game that was never designed for you to win. You no longer ask, what do they want from me? You ask, what does it cost me to keep giving it? Let's be clear. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming so rooted in your presence, so full within yourself, that you no longer move from hunger. You move from choice. This is not emotional suppression. It's emotional sovereignty. And once you taste it, there's no going back. Because suddenly, you see the game for what it is. Every chase, every anxious text, every overthought message was not love. It was negotiation. It was, please choose me so I don't have to sit with myself. But now, you sit with yourself. And you find something strange there. You are not broken. You are not empty. You are simply untrained in your own power. So now you train. And here's the first shift. Stop seeking connection. Start embodying gravity. There is a kind of man who doesn't need to convince anyone. He doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He doesn't try to be charming. He simply exists, anchored, attentive, quiet. And people feel him in the room before he says a word. You become that man not through tricks, but through subtraction. You remove the habits that leak power, over-explaining, chasing closure, filling silences with insecurity, monitoring their mood instead of mastering your own. Because what you don't say speaks volumes, and what you don't need becomes your strength. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes your weapon. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You don't control who texts back. You don't control how they feel about you tomorrow. You control how still you remain in the uncertainty. You become the eye of the storm. And in that stillness, people feel something they rarely feel in this world. Safety, gravity, depth. But don't mistake this for passivity. The Stoic doesn't drift. He directs. He just doesn't get emotionally hijacked by outcomes he cannot control. Now, let's go darker. Let's go deeper. Dark psychology teaches you something terrifying. People are drawn to those who don't need them. Because the human brain interprets scarcity as value, And attention that is earned rather than given away freely triggers reward centers far more powerfully. You don't have to manipulate this. You simply need to discipline your instincts. Stop responding instantly. Stop explaining yourself. Stop needing constant reassurance. Why? Because your time and attention are sacred. And when you treat them that way, others will too. But here's the truth that hurts before it liberates. You have to be willing to lose them to ever truly attract them. This is the psychological crucifixion most never undergo. Because it means releasing control. It means letting go of the outcome. It means saying, if I have to abandon myself to keep you, you were never mine. This is the rebellion. Not against a person, against the part of you that believed you had to become smaller to be loved. No more. From now on, you don't chase chemistry. You observe behavior. You don't beg for connection. You set standards. If they don't match your energy, your effort, your presence, you walk. Not with bitterness, not with drama, but with unshakable clarity. Because you've learned the most important truth of all. The most attractive man in any room is the one who doesn't need to be. He doesn't dominate with volume. He influences with silence. He doesn't seduce through performance. He magnetizes through presence. He doesn't beg for connection. He becomes a space people crave to enter. And when you live like this, when you build your life around purpose, structure, and inner stillness, something unexpected happens. You stop thinking about attraction entirely. You stop obsessing. You stop overanalyzing. You stop trying to figure them out, because you've figured yourself out. And now, you're a man on fire. Not with desperation, with direction. Now, you're no longer asking, how can I make her love me? You're asking, can she meet me at the level I've worked so hard to reach? That is the ultimate rebellion. That is how you break the spell. And it's not theoretical, it's practical. You practice this daily. You build routines. You master silence. You meditate in discomfort. You cut off what no longer aligns. You pursue your mission with ruthless focus. And you stop giving discounts on your energy. You don't become a better man for her. You become a dangerous man, one who is powerful, principled, and deeply unattached. And then, she's not just attracted, she's transfixed. Not because you tried to win her, but because you finally won yourself. But there's still one more truth, one final revelation that changes everything. You've stopped chasing. You've reclaimed your power. But what if the entire framework of attraction is flawed? What if there's something even deeper than power or detachment? What if the final answer isn't in winning the game, but seeing through it entirely? The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Close your eyes. Imagine a life where you're no longer trying to be liked, not adjusting, not waiting, not hoping, just being. No performances, no masks, no calculated pauses or timed replies. Only presence, only truth, only you, unfiltered, unbending, and untouchably real. Feels terrifying, doesn't it? Because for most of your life, you've believed that to be loved, you had to become something more desirable, more confident, more interesting, more strategic. But here's the final, most uncomfortable truth. The game of attraction is itself the trap. The moment you enter it, you lose. Because the premise is flawed. It's built on a lie. I must become something else in order to deserve love. But if love or desire is conditional on who you pretend to be, then what you win is not real. You've spent so much time trying to win people that you never stop to ask, do I even want the kind of person who needs to be impressed? You've chased attraction, thinking it would lead to connection. You've studied psychology, power, and silence, thinking they'd make you irresistible. And maybe they did. But attraction isn't the summit. It's the illusion. A flickering light that leads you into endless performance, a game of masks trying to seduce other masks. So what's the truth behind the truth? The final level is not to attract others, it's to transcend the need to. This is what Stoic philosophy was pointing toward all along. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live," he wasn't talking about mortality. He was talking about authenticity. He was talking about the tragedy of a life spent curating, performing, seducing, when the deepest joy is found in being yourself without apology. Now step back. All the dark psychological insights, all the emotional techniques, all the carefully engineered silences, they are powerful tools, but they are not the truth. They are bridges. Bridges to help you walk out of your patterns. Bridges to pull your power back from chaos. But they were never meant to be your home. Because the final truth is this: you are most attractive when you forget to be. When you're fully immersed in your path, when your eyes burn with purpose, when your presence is a byproduct of peace, not performance. This is not charisma, it's clarity. It's not seduction, it's sovereignty. You are no longer a performer on the stage. You are the architect of the entire theater. Because now you see the truth. Attraction is a mirror. People are drawn to your energy because of how it reflects something in themselves. And if that energy is built on need, they'll feel drained. If it's built on silence alone, they'll feel confused. But if it's built on depth, on stillness, focus, and inner truth, they feel safe, seen, awakened. You're not just attracting them, you're reminding them of something they forgot existed. And in a world obsessed with noise, with showing off, with chasing status, your stillness becomes a revolution. But this stillness isn't empty. It's filled with meaning. You know who you are. You know what you want. You know what you stand for. And you will not dilute any of it to fit someone else's mold. This is what it means to master the art of influence. Not by controlling others, but by becoming so free, so whole, so alive, that others feel more themselves in your presence. And that is irresistible. Let's return to the beginning. You thought this journey was about controlling attraction, but it was never about that. It was about remembering who you were before you thought you had to earn love. It was about seeing the machinery, disarming the trap, and stepping off the stage. You are no longer chasing attention. You are no longer performing your value. You are becoming the presence that changes rooms without saying a word. And in this final moment of truth, let this settle in your bones. You don't need to be loved by everyone. You don't need to win anyone. You just need to stop abandoning yourself in the process of being seen. That is where true power lives. Not in the game, not in the mask, but in the man who burns so clearly from within that others can't help but look. So walk forward now, not to seduce, not to win, but to live, because that is what they'll never forget.